We got to go, so welcome to this edition of the Native News Update. I'm your host for today's program, Paul Demain. Many of the stories right here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. Here are the stories for the day from the Associated Press and other news sources. On December 23rd, Sanford Children's Castle of Care celebrated a commencement ceremony for Jeremy Eagle, 20, a patient from St. Francis, South Dakota. Jeremy received his honorary diploma from Todd County High School in Mission, South Dakota. The school also recognized Jeremy with a varsity letter for track and wrestling. In March of 2009, physicians diagnosed Jeremy with Ewing sarcoma, a type of cancer. Throughout his treatment, Sanford Children's multidisciplinary team addressed Jeremy's needs, including providing for continuity in his education. The hospital school program at Sanford's Children's offers educational services to all school-age children, grades K through 12. The goal of the program is to encourage learning and make hospitalization a growth-producing experience. And we have another conversation with Kaiser Fellow Mark Trahant today on the great healthcare packaging debate and how Indian country comes up in the mix.
Mark Trahant, there's some progress on the bill. It's been reported out of the Senate now at this point on this big, massive health bill.
Right, Christmas Eve morning, they moved it through to the next step. So there'll be next, after the first of the year, a conference committee to negotiate further.
How many people are in that conference committee?
Boy, I can't even tell you. I should look that up. I know it, representatives from both the House and the Senate.
You're saying in your latest report that Indian country was part of the debate, but not part of the debate. What do you mean by that?
Well, there was a general agreement from the leadership to move the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act through on both the House and Senate side, and that's a good thing to avoid a lot of the problems that showed up before. But nobody really talked about what that meant. I think there are some extraordinary lessons the federal government could learn from the Indian Health Service experience. And that just hasn't been a part of the debate at all.
The Indian Healthcare Improvement Act as an act or an item or a bill is like a small chunk within the overall bill that's now going through the Senate.
Correct.
Okay, and so that is a tight little package down there that from what I can see, hasn't been talked about at all, other than when I hear people criticizing, and you note in your column, when people are criticizing government-sponsored health care.
Right. And I think that's really a good example of the duplicity involved, because they'll criticize it like crazy, but not one of those folks who are critical have ever proposed full funding of it.
And you find that fundamentally the basic problem with Indian healthcare, I think everyone agrees on that, is that it's never been properly funded?
Correct. I think IHS is really remarkable in a lot of ways, but you're looking at a cost per person that's well below, almost half below what they spend on prisoners for the federal prison system. So to me, that's just unconscionable.
We talked a little bit earlier, and I mentioned an attempt by myself when I was working in the governor's office, would come drive back and forth and go to the Indian Health Service clinic, was making a decent salary and wage at a time when the health clinic here on this reservation would sometimes begin suppressing its services 9-10 months into the fiscal year. And literally I said, why don't I just pull out $20 or write you out a check and co-pay for part of the services? I'm making some decent money every time I come up here. I could do that. And they says, well, Indian Health Service isn't set up to take cash co-pay. You're saying that they ought to look at that as a potential, and let's look at the full spectrum of third party payments.
Well, I think third party payments in general has to be looked at. As a matter of principle, I can understand why both the tribes and IHS has been reluctant to allow individuals to pay, because if it is a treaty right, that's just an acknowledgement that the United States is never going to live up to that agreement. On the other hand, how do we get more money into the system? One way I think we could do that is with both regional and national health foundations that could take the money. let's say you got per capita and feel really good about yourself that day and want to kick in $1,000 to help somebody who may be up against a contract health care problem, shortfall. Why isn't there a system set up for that? I think there is about, I have the numbers in my column, but roughly $300 billion that's going to philanthropy. And half of that goes to hospitals, hospital associations, and that sort of thing. In Indian country, it's about a zero.
Yeah, I've never heard, actually, off the top of my head, I don't remember ever hearing that a major foundation has funded the health clinic. Again, for some of the practical reasons you're talking about, people are reluctant to put the focus of healthcare onto some other entity other than the federal government who agreed to, under treaties, to provide healthcare.
Correct.
How would you see this as working? Have you thought that out? Is simply where it would be an individual, I go to the Indian Healthcare Clinic, something isn't covered, I file a request or ask for a donation, or how might that work?
I think one way it could work is if there was a foundation and it raised some serious money, if somebody went in and say they ran out of money for contract health care, and where it really hits is young males, because most males who are single are not eligible for Medicaid under current law. So the pool of money is very finite. And if it's not life-threatening, when the IHS runs out of money, they run out of money. What if there were a way that they then could appeal it to a foundation, and the foundation could say, yeah, we have a pool of money for this, and we'd be happy to kick in?
You're saying that proposal is kind of the flip side of rationing.
Right.
And rationing is what we were talking about before, where all of a sudden they began closing down services, or do you see rationing in some other form or fashion?
Well, rationing has existed in the Indian health system probably from the very beginning. In fact, I talked to a couple of doctors recently who put it this way, that they have to sometimes make hard choices. If they provide services under contract health care for patient A, they might not have the money for patient B when patient B has more need. And so that's a hard decision that you'd hate to see doctors have to make. In one way, it's good because they're more frugal. On the other hand, it affects real people.
Right. And I'm thinking, for example, these catastrophic kind of illnesses. Let's take a look at cancer, which people have to make some hard decisions about quality of life, how much you're putting in to extend someone's life, and sometimes I don't even know if that's debatable through Indian Health Service.
I'll give you an example of one that was particularly striking. Senator Tom Udall from New Mexico, in a Senate hearing, talked about a young man from a pueblo who wasn't able to be treated until his cancer hit the next stage. And that gap in time caused his ultimate demise. And if you could get early treatment on some of this stuff, it would make a big difference.
Isn't it the same as a preventative type of measure versus perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars of surgery and treatments that might come 10 years later?
Right. And that's where the Indian Health Service is just excellent, is particularly with diabetes care. They do a lot of upfront early treatment compared to the later when you're dealing with renal failure and things like that. But if you could just extend that to the broader part of the system, just think how many more folks you could affect.
Right. Who would move this idea? Is it going to go anywhere? I mean, right now I don't see anything like that in the bill. I don't see Indian Country talking a whole lot about it. How do you move a proposal like increasing third-party payments or a private foundation?
Well, there is a great movement to increase third-party payments through Medicaid, and that's going to go through in the bill. And also private insurance, for example, the tribes that have insurance for employees, to try to ratchet up that. And the regional disparity in IHS, I think, is largely an insurance problem, where you have a difference in spending between, say, the Great Plains and the Navajo area. Part of that would be who has insurance and who's tapping into Medicaid. So if there are ways to increase that, that is in the bill. But this idea of a large foundation that raised, and I think you could raise more than tens of millions of dollars. That's not part of the debate right now, but I'll keep bugging people. Maybe it just takes someone to start it and then go ask people to raise money.
You never know. We'll keep in touch with you. We'll do another report on this whole issue here in the near future. We appreciate your time, Mark. Where can we go to find your writings?
www.marktrahant.com.
We'll be there. Thanks a lot again.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you for joining with us again today. Miigwech. Come back again soon.